Welcome to Vinnie Politan Investigates. I'm Julia Jenae, filling in for Vinnie. The subject of our investigation tonight is an assassination that sparked a national debate. The murder of healthcare insurance CEO and the fame or infamy of the man accused of killing that CEO. Here's the story. Late last year, UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson was gunned down outside of a New York City hotel in a cold and calculated shooting. Video of the attack shows the shooter targeted Thompson and ambushed him. Despite what investigators describe as an elaborate planned getaway, law enforcement eventually found and arrested Luigi Mangione. The 26-year-old denied the murder, but allegedly has made many statements critical of the health insurance industry, calling companies parasitic. The killing led many around the country to speak out against health insurance companies and to support Mangione. It's a popular movement rallying around an Ivy League educated engineer they believe is a vigilante. Prosecutors are pushing for the death penalty as this legal battle heats up. This, according to prosecutors, was a planned attack, something that was detailed. And though the death penalty is not something the state officials could bring, the federal government has come in and filed charges against Luigi Mangione, and they are seeking the death penalty. Here's a look back at the buildup from that manhunt to arrest to charges being filed.
Members of the Altoona Police Department arrested Luigi Mangione, a 26-year-old male, on firearms charges. At this time, he is believed to be our person of interest in the brazen targeted murder of Brian Thompson, CEO of UnitedHealthcare, last Wednesday in Midtown Manhattan. Upon further investigation, officers recovered a firearm on his person, as well as a suppressor, both consistent with the weapon used in the murder. They also recovered clothing, including a mask consistent with those worn by our wanted individual. Also recovered was a fraudulent New Jersey ID, matching the ID our suspect used to check into his New York City hostel before the shooting incident. Additionally, officers recovered a handwritten document that speaks to both his motivation and mindset.
So whenever we got on scene there, we were able to pretty much find where he was at in the restaurant. And as soon as he was wearing a blue medical mask. As soon as we pulled that down, or we asked him to pull it down, me and my partner and I recognized him immediately, just from what we saw in the media with photos, videos. We just didn't even think twice about it. We knew that was our guy, but he was very cooperative with us. Didn't really give us too many issues. Once we found out his identity, we took it from there.
And all of that lead up to these charges and Luigi Mangione behind bars gets us to the first question in our investigation. If he is convicted, should Luigi Mangione be put to death? That's what federal officials want here. Here to help us answer that question, we have with us attorney Ali Benevento and criminologist and investigative profiler Dr. Casey Jordan. Good to have you both on. Ali, let me start with you. Based on what we know so far, what are some of the factors in this case that perhaps make it appropriate for the death penalty?
Thanks, Julia. Well, I think first we have to ask how we got here. Let's keep in mind that the feds did not charge in this case until approximately 4 months after all of this happened. Luigi had already been charged in state court, and the Department of Justice actually went on national television, on social media, and made calls for the death penalty to be imposed. And so that's how we got here. And so in terms of factors, I think we're working backwards. I think what they did was to try to make this case fit so that they could seek the death penalty.
Dr. Jordan, do you think that that's appropriate for the federal government to wait and see whether or not the death penalty is going to be applicable here? And what do you think about whether or not he should be someone on death row?
Well, I think Ali nailed it. And the bottom line is that I think that this is something they're doing for purely political reasons, and I think it's going to backfire because, number one, the chances of him actually being executed, even if he received the death penalty, are extremely low. I mean, it happens occasionally, but, very small percentage of people actually given the death penalty receive it. And in the process of that, it will just catapult him more into martyrdom. And we already know that what is working for him is the public support, and it's skewed, it's unreasonable, but there's a huge contingency of the public who has a beef with the insurance industry, who looks at Luigi Mangione as their caped crusader, as their hero. And as much as I think that's completely misguided and just wrong, the bottom line is he has a lot of public support. So even if he got the death penalty and were put to death, I think that would just be really counterintuitive. It would work against what we're trying to achieve in this. And that is to say what he did, he knew it was wrong, he did it anyway, and he needs to be punished.
Well, certainly his defense agrees, and they have been challenging the death penalty in this case. And here's a look at something that was interesting that they wrote in this motion that made a lot of constitutional arguments, but it also says that the federal government and the state officials, that they've done things purposely to create an environment that's not conducive for a fair trial. It says that Mangione's staged perp walk was done for the political needs of federal and local officials and not for public safety, that potential jurors, grand and petty, were imprinted with a scene of something out of a Marvel movie with dozens of agents needing to protect the public from a shackled monster Mangione. And we have that picture and video of how it looked. Ali, what did you think about this perp walk? Is this just standard procedure? There was a huge manhunt here.
There was a manhunt, but at the same time, you just heard from the officer from the Altoona Police Department that Mr. Mangione was cooperative with them, that he went peacefully. I think this was absolutely not necessary. I think it's political theater, just like we've seen in this case from the beginning. There was no reason for that many armed individuals surrounding him and him taking that very long, slow walk. I think Ms. Agnifilo actually pointed out in that motion that there are dozens of times where they are able to take suspects into custody through a back entrance or a basement. There was no reason for this, and this was done for purely political reasons and to influence the public to do exactly what Ms. Agnifilo is complaining of, which is to demonize Luigi Mangione in the eyes of the public. But I agree with my colleague. I think that all of this may backfire because Luigi Mangione, whether we think it's right or wrong, has an unprecedented amount of public support. And the more that the public perceives that he is being picked on or singled out, I think it only increases the amount of support that he's going to receive.
And we're seeing that play out in these filings even. There's one where the defense has argued that even the commentary on top news shows, even coming out of the White House, they say that the characterization of Luigi Mangione as a terrorist or someone who's an extremist is hurting them in the eyes of the public. But Dr. Jordan, what do you think we still need to know about him? This question about the death penalty is going to be digging into his background, even more than just we will get from the guilt phase. So what do you think there is still to know from the public about Luigi Mangione?
Well, based on, simply on what we know, public information, I would argue that there really aren't any terribly mitigating or aggravating circumstances. You know, he is a man who shot the CEO of UnitedHealthcare, but this is a man who grew up in tremendous wealth and privilege. He never had insurance with them. He never lacked for insurance. He had some alleged back surgery. I've never seen proof of that, but going with the idea that it's actually true, it's not like he had trouble paying for it. He had parents with deep pockets. So his motivation for doing this wasn't personal. It was on behalf of the general public, because he had gone rabbit holing down those, you know, on these online sites and decided this would become his cause. The only thing I think, I mean, honestly, I think they would be the smartest thing they could do is just drop the death penalty, because that will just kind of lower the temperature and make it look less political, and then just prosecute him for the murder. And then he'll get life in prison. The only hope I think he has is an insanity defense. He's clearly not mentally well. This plan was hatched probably in 6 months before it happened. You know, he started praising Ted Kaczynski. He was inspired by other mission-oriented killers. And I really do think that if you get enough mental health evaluation of him, you would get mitigating circumstances that would deny him the death penalty. So politically, they should just drop it like a hot potato and just go full steam ahead, pursuing a conviction which would result in life in prison.
Allie, let's talk about an insanity plea, because it's not always easy to get on the record and argue. There are a lot of steps there. What do you think the chances are here based on what we know?
I just don't see it. He does not present himself, at least from what the little bits that we've been able to glean from Ms. Agnifilow's filings and the little bits that we've seen. He doesn't present himself as someone who's out of touch with reality. And, you know, we cannot assume anything at this point in this case. However, if the defense is going to be that, yes, he is indeed the person on that video shooting Brian Thompson, but, and then fill in the blank after the but, I just don't see insanity being the reason. I think a more likely scenario would be that there would be a creative way to come up with some argument or a workaround for jury nullification, because Mr. Mangione has such wide public support, and because there are people who are not going to want to find him guilty. And even, I agree, I don't think he would get the death penalty even if he was convicted. But I also think that it's not a foregone conclusion that a jury would want to convict him at all.
Allie, a follow-up there, because we have the judge who's going to have to weigh in on whether or not the death penalty should even stay. What are your thoughts on whether we won't even have to let a jury decide?
I think that the motion was incredibly well written. I think it was well reasoned. I think that Ms. Agnifilo led with some really good points. I don't know that it's going to mean anything from a practical standpoint for Luigi. I think that this federal judge has to be under immense pressure. The eyes of the world are on this case. The Department of Justice, the President of the United States, and his entire administration have made it a point. They've gone out of their way to talk about it. And so there's a lot of pressure there. Do I think that the death penalty is going to be taken off the table by having these charges dismissed? Probably not. But I agree. I think this would be better tried as what it should have been in the first place, which is not a federal case, certainly not a death eligible case, and just a murder case in New York State court.
Allie Benevento and Dr. Casey Jordan, thank you so much for all of that. You're staying with us. When we come back from this break, we're going to ask another part of this case, a question about another part. How does the dropping of terrorism charges affect this case? Stay with us.
My two best friends were just murdered.
Join me for a Court TV true crime series where we take you from the crime scene to the courtroom.
Donna Adelson hates every piece of grass that Dan Marcel ever walked on.
It's something that'll haunt all of us forever.
It always seemed like he was covering or deceiving.
This was a whole different level.
Victim to Verdict with Ted Rowlands, a Court TV original series. Season premieres September 27th.
Only on Court TV.
It's completely out of touch. And it's insults the intelligence of the American people. It's a lived experience.
Luigi Mangione faces parallel cases there in New York. He is charged in the state of New York, and he also has federal charges in the United States District Court, his federal case, where he faces the death penalty. But in that state case, there was something unique that was filed. Domestic terrorism charges, where he was accused of trying to intimidate or coerce a population, something that the defense challenged. Here's a look at the ruling that the judge actually made in that case, starting with the arguments between these two sides. The defense argued that there is legally insufficient evidence of first-degree murder, alleging that the victim was killed in furtherance of an act of terrorism, and of second-degree murder as a crime of terrorism. And they urged the court to dismiss those two counts in the indictment. The defendant argued that both legislative intent and case law demonstrate that the defendant's actions do not fit within the statute, and that the people of New York did not present legally sufficient evidence of those counts. And then moving on to what the state of New York said, they argued that both counts are legally sufficient and that terroristic intent was established because the defendant was not engaged in a personal vendetta, but violently broadcasting a social and political message that inspired threats to employees of UHC, UnitedHealthcare. So that gets us to the next question in our investigation. How does the dropping of the terrorism charges affect the case? Because that was the outcome from this judge. Let's bring in our guests to talk about it. Here to help with our investigation is attorney Ali Benevento, and also joining us, former DEA Senior Special Agent and Security Expert David Katz. He's also founder and CEO of Global Security Group Incorporated. Great to have you both on. David, let me start with you. What do you think about domestic terrorism being charged there in New York in the state case against this defendant based on the details that we saw, especially the actual planning and shooting of a healthcare CEO?
Well, I think the charge could have been sustained. They just didn't get there. I mean, the fact of the matter is that if they could have established that Mangione had the intent to broadly coerce the health insurance industry, or to somehow intimidate employees of the health insurance industry in general, they could have made this charge, I think, stick. As it turns out, they didn't have that sufficient evidence, and the judge, I think, correctly dismissed the charge. Frankly, as far as the impact, it's not going to have any impact. I mean, you know, one of the prior guests that you just had the earlier segment talked about jury nullification, and I think that if I was going to put money on the outcome, I think that's exactly what we're looking at, especially with Bragg's district attorney's office in Manhattan and the jury pooled in Manhattan. I think that's what the defense is looking for, and I think that's a better than even chance they're going to get it.
Ali, David brings up a good point. We've got a New York jury. Most recently, one of the most high-profile cases that happened there was the Sean Diddy Combs case. And the husband of the defense attorney for Luigi Mangione represented Diddy. And he, I think, went very far with this New York jury by arguing that human trafficking, sex trafficking, was just too far. And it seemed that the jury agreed. They acquitted him on those counts. Could it actually help the state, or the state of New York, the people here, that domestic terrorism isn't one of those charges?
I'm actually very glad that you brought up Diddy, because to me, that's just another example, and I realize that was a federal case, but that is another example of prosecutors overcharging. They took it too far. They should have never charged that case as a RICO case, and I would say the same for this case in New York State. They should have never brought the terrorism charges. It was an overreach, and at the end of the day, even though the grand jury indicted, when the judge reviewed it, he said that absolutely there was not a sufficient legal basis for it. So, you know, yes, I agree. I think that there is a distinct possibility that that happens in terms of either an outright acquittal or the possibility of jury nullification. But again, this is an example of prosecutors, I don't want to say getting greedy, but overcharging when they should stick to what they are able to prove and what the facts, as they believe them to be, laid out, and what that can support in court. And they overdid it here, and the judge shot him down for it.
Let's take a look at what the judge said. This is part of the decision that we've pulled out, where the court agrees with the defendant that the people are appearing to conflate an ideological belief with the intent to intimidate or coerce a civilian population. While the defendant was clearly expressing an animus towards UHC and the healthcare industry, generally it does not follow that his goal was to intimidate and coerce a civilian population, and indeed there was no evidence presented of such a goal. It goes on to say that the evidence presented failed to establish that the defendant committed the crime to coerce or intimidate a population or influence or affect the policy of a unit of a government, and therefore the first two counts of the indictment are dismissed. David, there was a lot of fear going around at the time when people saw this image on their screen, not knowing who this was, why it happened, who was next, and he had a list, allegedly, of other targets.
I would say, in my personal opinion, that his intent, if in fact he did perpetrate this crime, was to terrorize, was to coerce and intimidate. However, you need to make a showing of proof. And if in the absence of such a showing, what do you got? You can't just say, well, he ideologically expressed hatred and animus against the healthcare industry. That's not going to do it. You have to actually present evidence. Like, here's a hit list. This is my intent. I've posted on social media. I've made some step in furtherance of a broader conspiracy, or I've told somebody that my intent was in fact to maybe. We can go anywhere we want with this. I'm in favor of a single payer health system, and I think if I can scare enough of the insurance executives in this country, maybe I can make that happen. That maybe, but you have to actually prove it, and that's the problem. If you don't have evidence, don't charge it. And I think politically, it might have sounded good, and I think a lot of times prosecutors are not above trying to like get another headline, but at least have the evidence to substantiate it.
Allie, again, does this impact the case at all in a way that would hurt I know the defense asked for it, but it could help them if they wanted to show that the government is overcharging this case?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, from a practical standpoint, does it change anything? No. Luigi is still facing the death penalty in federal court. He's still facing the possibility of life in prison in state court. But I mean, this certainly took a little bit of the sexy out of it for the New York State case. Now it's just a run-of-the-mill murder, taking away that buzzword of terrorism. But you know, from a practical standpoint, Luigi's not any better off than he was necessarily before the order came out.
All right, it changes the docket, but maybe that is all. David Katz and Allie Benevento, thanks so much for your analysis. We have got to get to a break, but when we come back, we've got more on Luigi Mangione. We want to know what his defense will be. Welcome back to Vinnie Politan Investigates. I'm Julia Jenae, filling in for Vinnie. We're continuing our investigation into the assassination of health insurance CEO Brian Thompson, the ensuing debate about the healthcare industry, and the support that has been an outpouring for Luigi Mangione, the man accused with this murder. Here's the story. It's a brazen shooting caught on video. It was a meticulously planned and targeted attack outside of a Manhattan hotel late last year. UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson was a father of two and husband, and his murder sent shockwaves around the country. Law enforcement tracked down and arrested a suspect, 26-year-old Luigi Mangione, who came from a wealthy family. He claims he wasn't the shooter, and he has not been afraid to make a lot of statements critical of the healthcare insurance industry. On shell casings found at the scene, investigators found the words deny, defend, and depose. Controversial tactics many allege insurance companies use to reject their patients' claims. There's been a large amount of public support for Mangione and opposition to health insurance companies. It's a movement that is centered around a man supporters believe is a vigilante, a man they hope can avoid the death penalty. Now, Mangione, according to his defense, denies being the shooter. But everything that we're seeing inside of the courtroom, including the plea of not guilty, it seems that the defense wants to march towards a trial and claim that their client is not guilty of this. But he reportedly left a manifesto. Journalist Ken Klippenstein posted what he claimed to be the full transcript of Luigi Mangione's manifesto to his website. Newsweek was able to verify a copy and said that it's a legitimate transcription from law enforcement authorities. Court TV has not been able to independently confirm that authenticity. But take a listen to one of our producers reading Mangione's writings.
To the feds, I'll keep this short because I do respect what you do for our country. To save you a lengthy investigation, I state plainly that I wasn't working with anyone. This was fairly trivial. Some elementary social engineering, basic CAD, a lot of patience. The spiral notebook, if present, has some straggling notes and to-do lists that illuminate the gist of it. My tech is pretty locked down because I work in engineering, so probably not much info there. I do apologize for any strife of traumas, but it had to be done. Frankly, these parasites simply had it coming. A reminder, the U.S. has the #1 most expensive healthcare system in the world, yet we rank roughly number 42 in life expectancy. United is the largest company in the U.S. by market cap, behind only Apple, Google, Walmart. It has grown and grown, but has our life expectancy? No. The reality is, these have simply gotten too powerful, and they continue to abuse our country for immense profit because the American public has allowed them to get away with it. Obviously, the problem is more complex, but I do not have space, and frankly, I do not pretend to be the most qualified person to lay out the full argument. But many have illuminated the corruption and greed. For example, Rosenthal, Moore. Decades ago, the problems simply remain. It is not an issue of awareness at this point, but clearly power games at play. Evidently, I am the first to face it with such brutal honesty.
What does it all mean, and will this be the first exhibit the prosecution shows this jury if this goes to a trial? That leads us to the next question in this investigation. And that's, what will Luigi Mangione's defense be? Let's bring back in our guest to help us answer this question. We have attorney Ali Benevento with us, and also joining us, former New York police officer and retired police lieutenant and commanding officer of the Nassau County Police K-9 Unit, Mike Gould, is with us. Thank you both for being on. Ali, I want to start with you, and I want to couch it. What have we heard so far on the record from Luigi's team? He's represented by the Agnifilo firm, Karen Agnifilo, the main attorney representing him. Have they given any hints to what their defense will be?
Not much, but I can't imagine that it's anything other than one of two things. It's either the Shaggy defense, it wasn't me, or they're going to argue that, yes, it was him and give some sort of justification for it. But, you know, at the end of the day, we haven't heard a whole lot. We've seen some things that have been provided to media and leaked online or spoken about by law enforcement and prosecutors. But at the end of the day, there are still motions pending in this case. Even the excerpt that we saw there a few moments ago is the subject of an outstanding motion a motion in limine to exclude evidence in the Pennsylvania matter. So I think that a lot of the decisions about what the defense will be may turn on the orders that the courts give in some of these outstanding motions as it relates to evidence that may or may not be admissible in court.
And it gets more complicated when we have these multiple cases, 3 cases that he's facing, 1 in Pennsylvania, 2 in New York City. Mike, I got to ask you, as a former New York police officer, what are the sentiments towards this defendant, and perhaps even the way the public has responded to this individual?
Well, to be honest with you, I have no love for Luigi Mangione, but I do have respect for equal justice for all. And I can cite homicide after homicide after homicide where the crimes are more egregious. There's gun violence tonight, there'll be multiple murders in the outer boroughs of New York City, and you won't even know about it. We might hear about it on the 10 o'clock news. I think this was grossly overcharged. Political and media attention should not be what you decide to seek the death penalty for. So I think this was like, I've never seen anything like it. This was like a epic Hollywood production, a bad one that I've never seen before with the mayor. It was incredible. And I thought that day one when he got off the helicopter in Manhattan. And so I think it's grossly overcharged. Unless he has a twin brother, I don't see his defense. If this is literally a smoking gun, the evidence, the manifesto, the gun was found on him, I don't see where this is going unless evidence is completely suppressed.
There's a lot there. And you mentioned the publicity in this case, the way that it looks, the optics. His attorney hasn't said a lot in front of the media. She said a lot through her filings. But here's a listen to a press conference that she did give, Karen Agnifilo, after one of the hearings in this case about that subject.
Luigi's right to a fair trial is being infringed upon because he is being publicly treated as guilty and as having the presumption of guilt as opposed to the presumption of innocence, which is what he is entitled to. And although of course, I understand the NYPD's need for a press conference before an arrest or after an arrest, which they did here. I didn't like it, but they did it, and I understood it. What I did not understand was how shocking it was that this week on HBO, in a documentary, I see the chief of detectives and the New York City mayor, full hair and makeup done, sitting down and giving an interview for television and talking about the evidence in Luigi's case, talking about police paperwork that we don't have, talking about forensics that we have not yet received. I guess we have now today, but I didn't when I was sitting there learning about the case, hearing an actor play Luigi reading from a journal that they say is Luigi's, and we have yet to receive it from the prosecution. And so it's outrageous that they have time to go and prejudice Mr. Mangione's ability to receive a fair trial and go out and make these statements, but not give this to us. And so we are concerned because if the chief of detectives is telling everybody about all this evidence, and what if it ultimately gets suppressed because it was an illegal search and seizure in Altoona, Pennsylvania, how is he going to get a fair trial?
Mike, I want to go back to you since we have you, because we're seeing as she's talking those images that we've added of the different perp walks. Is that standard to you? What do you think goes into this individual being given the treatment that we've seen here?
Politics. The Manhattan District Attorney is notorious for overcharging, undercharging, or not charging. So this is a case where everybody, the police department, the police brass, they want to get in front of the television cameras. You won't see the chief of detectives. As I said, a homicide is going to take place tonight. A premeditated, intentional homicide, sadly, is going to happen in one of the 5 boroughs tonight. You're not going to know about it. So this was a media spectacle. I do agree with the defense attorney. However, they're still not identifying what their defense actually is. They have a big road to climb, getting rid of what he was found with. If that's suppressed, I still think that there is so much evidence that would have to be suppressed not to find him guilty of a second-degree murder, intentional premeditated murder.
Allie, if they're going the route of just arguing about the fair trial not being able to be achieved, what's the likelihood? Where would you go if not New York? Where do you think he could get a fair trial after there has been so much publicity?
I mean, isn't that kind of the point? There's been so much publicity that everyone everywhere, way outside of New York, has seen it, is talking about it. It's all over social media. It's all over the world. And so to her point, I agree. She's exactly right. They have created this problem, and they have continued to do it. They as recently as this week, and I'm not sure, you know, we haven't gotten into this, but the judge in the federal case issued an order today instructing the DOJ and others to stop talking about this case in the media and to stop going on TV, because every time that they release information or talk about evidence and make statements about this case and make assumptions about Mr. Mangione, they are further creating difficulty with jury selection and the ability to have a fair trial. They're making it worse.
Allie Benevento and Mike Gold, thanks so much for being with us, because on that note, when we come back, we're going to talk about the public reaction to Luigi Mangione.
Luigi single-handedly brought us together and united us in the U.S. And I hope he understands that.
A tragedy on the Mississippi, a young mother executed and her 2-day-old daughter allegedly thrown into the river. Now the baby's father stands trial for double murder.
The Baby in the River murder trial, weekday mornings on Court TV.
The brutal murders of 2 young girls.
Delphi is not one of those places where this would happen.
I killed Abby and Willie.
Victim to Verdict with Ted Rowlands. Season premieres Saturday night, 8 Eastern and Pacific.
Only on Court TV.
things that were unprecedented about the case against Luigi Mangione. First, just the details of the alleged crime that he's accused of, the killing of a healthcare CEO in the streets of Manhattan, where no one was able to apprehend the shooter after it happened, and a manhunt ensued. This was a defendant, a suspect, who was captured in another state. But another thing that was unprecedented, after they had their suspect, after officials had someone behind bars, what they didn't anticipate was the overflowing of reaction from people, especially young people.
Wondering why we regard Luigi Mangione as a hero. We don't. We see him as the symbol he is in a time that he's needed. If you don't believe me, check this out.
Luigi single-handedly brought us together and united us in the U.S. And I hope he understands that.
It's funny how there's people out there that are happy that the guy who shot the healthcare CEO got arrested today, when that CEO guy probably killed way more people than the guy who shot him. I mean, this guy basically became the modern-day Martin Luther King. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if there's statues of him in the near future or something.
What do you think about Luigi Mangione?
Up in the air about it.
Why is that?
Because he killed someone, but I can understand part of his...
What do you think about Luigi Mangione, the CEO assassin?
I think he's cool.
What would you rate him 1 through 10?
He's hot, so like 8, sure. Solid 8.
8?
Yeah, I'm taken, so I'm not gonna answer. Oh, no, but the 10.
The dude who killed the UnitedHealthcare CEO, and scrolling on TikTok right now and seeing every single girl on the entire planet simping over him. This guy has literally won over every single girl on the internet.
I think attractiveness has a lot to do with why people are fans of him. It has to do with what he stands for as well.
Luigi Mangione. I am just going crazy. And I'm not going crazy like for his looks, okay? This whole corporate capitalist takedown is just...
Luigi Mangione doesn't even know that he is a national phenomenon right now. Like, he doesn't even know how loved he is.
And right now, it feels like we're all united. At this point, is the people against the CEOs.
Even though the guy got caught, which is very unfortunate, at least he left a very powerful message, and he highlighted how terrible the healthcare system is in America. I think he'll go down as a hero in history.
So thank you, Luigi, for your service, because America is coming back together.
It's unusual, it's uncomfortable, especially because it involves a murder, but it can't be ignored. It's something that is going to have to be dealt with, not only inside of the courtroom, but also outside. And it gets us to the last question in our investigation. What is the public reaction to Luigi Mangione? Let's bring in our guests who can talk about that. We have joining us now a supporter and spokesperson for the December 4th Legal Committee, also a supporter of Luigi Mangione. Jamie Peck is with us. She's also the host of podcast Party Girls, and still with us, criminologist and investigative profiler Dr. Casey Jordan. Jamie, let me start with you. Explain to people what it is about Luigi Mangione.
So I think support for Luigi really is the great unifier of American politics right now. And it is hard for politicians and maybe some mainstream media to understand this, because politics as we know it and politicians' careers are based on division, and this is supported by corporate lobbyists, right? The last thing they want is for the American people to agree that we all want Medicare for all and that we're very angry at the people who've been profiting off of our suffering. So instead of recognizing that support for Luigi stems from legitimate outrage, they slander people, they call them terrorists, they act like they don't understand, when in fact, this death was perhaps the most understandable killing of all time that I could think of in American history. People are fed up with being killed. They're fed up with being terrorized by this insane for-profit healthcare system that's bureaucratic, wasteful, inefficient, and only exists to extract money from people's suffering.
Dr. Jordan, I got to get your reaction to that as someone who's a criminologist, behavioral specialist. You have Jamie here saying that this was an understandable death. What does that say about society and about these young people and what they are seemingly fed up with?
Listen, the outrage has been clear, and understandable is different than excusable or justifiable under the law. And it really is apples and oranges. We have to keep in mind that he was not a grudge collector. He was not a man who was wronged personally by the insurance industry. You know, he was doing this on behalf of all the people. And that is why he is really perceived as such a hero right now. But I mean, the bottom line is that, you know, is he famous or infamous? You have to condemn the killing of other human beings to simply make a statement. He might think that he is a freedom fighter, but, you know, the federal government considered him a terrorist. I know those charges have been dropped, but you've got to understand, he's seeking vengeance for being wronged. I mean, he thinks he's smiting he's a superhero smiting the enemy, which is big insurance. And that shows you that he has delusions of grandeur, that he's fundamentally narcissistic. So when people praise him and laud him, you are just being manipulated by him. You are falling right into his trap. And really, this is not so unlike John Hinckley, who attempted to assassinate President Reagan 40 years ago to make a political statement. And, you know, you can say it's about Jodie Foster, but he was found not guilty by reason of insanity. It's a different world now. I don't think it will ever work for Luigi, but all the public sentiment that supports him, I think, could backfire and just make a jury, short of a stealth juror who gets on there just to nullify the verdict, it could actually make people more convinced to send a message: you cannot kill human beings to make a political statement.
And Jamie, I want to get you to talk about the support. Like, how much money are we talking that people are raising? And do the supporters care if he's actually innocent or not?
So to date, we've raised about $1.25 million for Luigi Mangione's defense. And this comes from people from all walks of life, people from all over this country, people from all over the world, and people from across the political spectrum, despite the Trump administration's attempts to make this a partisan issue. People from all walks of life are very, very angry at being terrorized and killed and made to live in fear by their health insurance companies. One study shows that the private U.S. health insurance system caused approximately 700,000 excess deaths in the year 2023 alone. So this is a company, and the person sitting atop the company was responsible for more deaths than Osama bin Laden in only 2023. So yes, I think a lot of people are citing their grievances with their health insurance companies and the way that their loved ones have been made to suffer and even die as a result of the actions of Brian Thompson. So yeah, I think the donations are a broad condemnation of this type of bureaucratic murder that passes as just the natural order of things, but that people are absolutely sick of.
Dr. Jordan, I got to give you the final word. I only have about 30 seconds, but do you think that prosecutors, based on this public reaction, should offer a deal to Luigi?
Oh, I think it's going to go just like Brian Kohberger, frankly, that at the 11th hour, he will take a deal because there is no enemy in a foxhole. He is a mission-oriented killer. It's true. His mission may be noble to many, but it is fundamentally illegal. So, yeah, I don't think they're going to go to trial at the very last minute. I really do think that there will be a deal.
Thank you for that analysis, Jamie Peck. Thank you for joining the program. We will see you all at another time. We have to leave it there. This is a case that's going to continue to be looked at, and it's a question of whether or not this is a person who should be celebrated, and should that impact what happens inside of the courtroom. We'll continue to follow this case, the one against Luigi Mangione, happening in New York. 3 different cases, including a state case in Pennsylvania. That's all the time we have for now. I'm Julia Jenae. Thank you for being with us on Vinnie Politan Investigates. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.